All right, good morning, folks. It's good to see everybody. Must be summer because Councillor Russell doesn't have a tie on. So I want to call the meeting to order, the meeting of the Executive Standing Committee, and I want to acknowledge that we're in Mi'kma'ki, the traditional, the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We acknowledge the peace and friendship treaty signed in this territory, and we believe that we are all treaty people. We have quorum, so we will begin. Does somebody want to consider the approval of the minutes of April the 24th? Moved by Councillor Wayne Mason of downtown Halifax, seconded by Councillor Patty Cuddle of Spryfield and area. And what else you got? Prospect and everything else? Sambro Loop. All those in favor? Opposed? Minutes are approved. The order of business. Madam Clerk, any changes?
There have been no additions or deletions.
Does somebody want to move the approval of the order of business as circulated? Moved by Councillor Daigle-Gammon, seconded by the tireless Councillor Russell. All those in favor? Opposed? Business arising. Calls for declaration of conflicts. There are no motions of reconsideration, rescission, deferred business. There's no tabled matters. Correspondence, Clerk?
No correspondence received from the clerk's office.
Thank you. Petitions?
No petitions.
No petitions. Presentations, none at this point. Information items. We will go to item 12.1.1. This is proposed administrative order respecting public appointments to committees of council and external boards. Committee, what is your wish? Is there a presentation on this? Is there? There is? Okay. Well, good morning, folks.
Morning, Mayor Savage and members of Executive Committee. We do have a presentation available. We can run through that, and then we do have time available for questions if that is the will of committee. Thank you. So my name is Ian McLean. I'm the municipal clerk, and I'm joined by April Doucette, who is our public appointments coordinator, who spent a lot of time working on this. Before we begin, I do want to make a couple of quick acknowledgements for some people that worked on this. This project has been going on since 2018. It hit a bit of a pause due to COVID, and I wanted to say a quick thank you to some people who worked on this quite extensively. So Cheryl, Phoebe, Hannah, April, Laura, Liam, and Kevin for the work that they did on putting this together and some of the engagement that occurred. Next slide. So before you today, you will see a revised draft public appointment policy for executive committee's consideration for recommendation to regional council. As a part of this review, the intent and the purpose behind this review was to look at the public appointment policy when it came to the principles that it is followed with, how it is applied on a consistent basis, and the integrity of the policy. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, this has been quite an extensive process. The original public appointment policy was adopted in 2011 as a mechanism to standardize public appointments to boards, committees, and commissions, and to include standing committees in the nomination process. While some revisions occurred during this time, this is the first major review that has occurred since 2011. The work on this began in 2018 and continued into 2020. This included a staff review board, as well as multiple public engagement opportunities, looking at the policy, looking at the appointment, and looking at how it was implemented within the HRM. As I mentioned before, this work was paused due to the global pandemic, and we are really happy that we were able to pick it back up, and that's what's being brought to you today. This review was robust and included the formation of a multi-departmental staff review board, consultation with the board and committee members via survey, interviews with members of council, a public survey that solicited 455 responses, special consultation was completed with the Youth Advisory Committee, and a jurisdictional scan was completed as a part of this review effort. Every time I flip it, you can go. The intention and the pillar of the principle behind this review is to try to show the value that these boards and committees play within the organization, including how the applications for these boards are considered. This policy values community participation as a service that is fundamental to the success of our municipality, strives to have appointments made by council that reflect the diversity of the communities that they serve, and seeks to bring appointments of members from a community who bring a variety of skills, expertise, and perspectives as required and requested by regional council for these boards and that people are being asked to serve on. Before you have a report that goes over a number of the changes to the public or proposed changes to the public appointment policy, as well as the public appointment policy as it has been redrafted, I'm going to go over some general changes that have occurred to it and the intention behind some of the changes. I'm not going to go in depth through every single specific change, but we're going to try to give you an indication of what this should do in the future. The proposed policy outlines the various recruitment types and the purpose as well of when the additional steps are required, such as review boards or interviews. General changes in this policy: the staff review board recommended that the policy be rewritten as an administrative order rather than a policy for improved transparency, tracking, and maintenance. The process is clearly outlined in this policy, and the entire intention behind this is more transparency and align it with the procedures. For the recruitment component of it, the policy outlines the various types of recruitments and the application process for each type of recruitment, including the use of cover letters, references, and resumes. These are all items that were brought up by members of the public when we went to speak to them about some of the challenges and barriers they had in the application process. The eligibility requirements have changed from 18 to 19 to align with the age of majority in Nova Scotia. A clause is available that will allow us to go and utilize people under the age of 19 with appropriate parental permissions. This is very important for items such as the Youth Advisory Committee. We now define a resident as an individual has lived in the HRM for a minimum of 6 months prior to the application date. We have used and duplicated the same residency requirements for voting in our policy on that. That's the intention behind that. The number of committee applicants somebody can apply for has moved from 3 to 2 or to 2, 1 internal and 1 external. This was done as an efficiency process. We did a review of the amount of third priorities that were chosen and came back with none. So this is meant to be an efficiency process. If somebody's given the ability to apply for 3, but we never allow a third option to be provided, it seemed to be a redundancy reducing. The nomination process, we attempted to provide clarity on the use of review boards and internal panels. And for the appointment process, we've attempted to outline clearly when appointments are effective, the process that council used to select individuals, how we communicate on appointments, and the process for reappointment to an external board. This slide demonstrates the types of recruitment types that we have broken this down into. We have set up in standard, so requires general recruitment, our normal recruitment process. Special or expertise, this is when the terms of reference for a board or committee require specific skill sets, education, or background as per the request of regional council. Specified stakeholder recruitments is when council has identified a specific stakeholder to nominate group members for serving, and then our external bodies that we recruit for as well. The next slide shows a breakdown of the types of committees and the types of recruitment as established. We've gone through and looked at the terms of reference and tried to breaking these down to the different types of recruitment strategies we'll have to follow. This is one of the main points of question that we get into our office from members of regional council and from members of the public, and that ties into the application process. The proposed policy outlines the application process and requirements for each recruitment type. Standard recruitment types is a complete application form only, resumes and cover letters not required. Special expertise recruitments will be an application form, resumes and/or cover letter may be required depending on the committee type. References may be requested if interviews are conducted. Stakeholder recruitments, the nominations are submitted by an identified stakeholder group and they have their own process to follow. And for our external bodies, a complete application is required. These changes are being done as a way to remove redundancy and an attempt to try to make it cleaner and clearer for the members of the public who are applying for us, and based on some of the routine comments that we have from people who are trying to apply for these boards and the feedback that we've had from their experiences with that. The next slide gives an overview of the application selection process and shows where council has a role and where council does not have a role through committees, and when they get the final decision when it comes to regional council, how it gets there. You'll see here that we have included a few more mays and reduced the requirement for references, resumes, and interviews, depending on the type of committee. This does not preclude the requirement to have this or to make this a requirement again in the future. But these are, again, barriers to participation that we have heard from people that have applied, and we've tried to make it so it's simpler for the application process. One of the feedback points we had is that people have to complete a fairly extensive interview component on the website, and then we ask them to provide a resume and references, creating some redundancies. We've tried to remove that wherever possible, just in an attempt to make this clearer and cleaner for the members of the public who are applying. The applicant communication process was in another area that we've identified as a gap and tried to put some more communication requirements from our side onto this. Our office is looking at timelines for when communication must be provided to applicants, but also the amount of time an applicant has to consider a position. This will be the first time that we've actually had a defined time where people have to give us an answer if they will serve on this board, hopefully allowing us to be more efficient when it comes to our communication to them from these residents. Upon notification of all applicant outcomes, the people that are serving on these boards will be posted on halifax.ca, and we will maintain the use of alternates, but will not be posting that. Alternates are for when we have members of the community who are selected to serve on a board if a vacancy occurs in the future. We don't want to put those publicly, but we do find some efficiencies on there, so we don't have to do a new recruitment campaign when it does occur. Orientation requirements for members have been aligned to mirror council's terms of reference, and also require training be done before serving so that we can ensure we have as much and appropriate education for the people that are coming to serve on these committees as possible. This obviously does change when we deal with external bodies, but this is an attempt to create some efficiencies, but also a standard approach to how we onboard people when they come and serve on our boards and committees. Finally, the last slide is a recommendation on this policy. We are asking for this to be something that we can look at implementing and doing for our recruitment cycles. This is something that we will continue to monitor, and we'll look at doing some UAT testing on it to make sure that when we've gone through and looked at the application of it, that it's actually accomplishing what we're looking for. And this will be a policy that we expect to have a routine review of, because as policies change, as our committees change, we had a motion in council last week to look at the actual structure and the setup of our committees. My expectation is that could have some effect on this. So this is intended to be a living, breathing document with the policy recommendations in front of you based on as much engagement as possible that we could with people who serve on these committees. One of the other efforts we will be looking at implementing soon is a exit interview and a follow-up survey from members of our committees. That is something we haven't been able to implement yet. We're hoping that'll give us some more information as well as we continue to look at these. And if there's any questions, I can answer those.
Thank you very much, Ian. I appreciate that. That's a good presentation. Councillor Cuttle, do you want to lead us off?
Gladly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll start with the motion here that the Executive Standing Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council adopt proposed Administrative Order 2023-001 GOV respecting public appointments to committees of council and external boards as set out at Attachment 1 of the staff report dated June 20th, 2023, which includes the repeal of the 2011 public appointment policy.
Second, Councillor Mason. Councillor Cuttle.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mason. Yeah, so I'm really excited to see this here. I think I brought it up at council just last week, saying we have to fix the process, and Ian, you said it's coming, and here it is. So, I mean, that's awesome, really quick. Just kidding, because I know it's been in the works for several years. Yeah, so my concerns around this was that, the process seemed to be a bit of a mystery to our residents who are applying for committees and understanding how the process worked, when they were going to get appointed. In reading the report, there were things about this, the appointments being in camera, so therefore we couldn't even give residents updates about where we were in the process and when they might be appointed, or if they were going to be appointed. The gap between the application and receiving, the request to serve often was a long period of time, in which case residents actually lost interest. I think people, like, when they apply, there's a certain amount of, motivation and enthusiasm and momentum, and then all of a sudden that would just get lost through the process and people would get discouraged, particularly around the lack of information about the process, which I didn't really understand that either. So I'm hoping you can just talk a little bit about how these changes might address some of those issues. Like, when people call and ask for an update on their application, will we be able to give them updates now and kind of help lead people through the process? I was also really happy to see that we're going to have this kind of standard form for people to fill out, and that we're really kind of delineating the different roles that the committees play, and different volunteers can play on those committees in terms of what we ask for, whether it's, this application form, an application form plus resume. I think that's great. And I know from our end too, it will be nice, because when we receive those packages and we have, a couple hundred pages of resumes in all different formats, it's a tedious process. So I think the application form is great. I'm really happy to see that. I was wondering about a calendar. Like, is there like a place where we can go and see this, like, when are appointments made, and how that works? And I'm also wondering about the 2-week notification. Like, once someone gets notified that they've been accepted onto a committee and they have 2 weeks to respond. Like, I'm just thinking about the process. Like, would a week be okay for that? Because then you get the reply, and if they don't accept the position, you can go to the second person. Because otherwise we start to miss meetings where this comes to council and we have to approve things. If it's not done in a timely fashion, it feels like it just keeps getting pushed out, and pushed out. And that's leading to some of the issues around the timeliness of the appointments to council. So I'm just wondering about that 2-week time frame. That's almost out of time here, so I will let you answer those that barrage of questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cuddle. Mayor Savage, through you to the councillor. I would like to pretend like we could be that efficient on your requests all the time. This one was just good timing. So as much as your request was lovely timed, it won't be this quick all the time. So I have taken a list of your questions. I'll try to answer them and remind me if I missed any of them. So first off, on the communication to the applicants, that is one of our intentions behind this, is to try to improve and increase the amount of information we can provide to applicants. The in-camera nature of public appointments is very important. We have some boards where we have hundreds of applicants, and we want to make sure we're protecting the privacy of the people who do apply for those. So we need to be open about the fact that the in-camera nature is an inherent part of this process. We are looking at how to be more proactive with our recruitments, so we can be making appointments for boards when people's terms are coming up, not when people have had their term come due and they have to sit and wait until we can find somebody to appoint them to replace them. So from a timeliness component, that's the first part that we are, from an administrative side, trying to be more proactive on. April came on last year, and she's going through her first cycle now of trying to be able to establish this. We believe that will be the first step we have to do to see these improvements. That's an operational thing. That's not a policy thing. That's something that we have to do a better job of on our side. On the communication to the applicants, that was one of the entire goals of how we've tried to talk about the communication approach to this, is so people aren't sitting in limbo, wondering about their application for as long as they have. There may be some delays depending on the type of committee, especially the external boards. And I do want to point council to the quantity of committees that are managed by this organization and the number of them that occur. We do a significant amount of recruitments and a significant number of committees. So we do have some that are more problematic and are more complicated to work with based on timing and the support the committees have on them. So the timelines of these can be dependent very much on the individual committee, individual body, but that is one of our main goals in this public appointment policy refresh with the AO of improving that communication out for them. As far as everybody here has seen the length of the packages that you get when we have our appointments, part of what we're doing as far as trying to reduce the requirement for having cover letters and references is just that redundant information that we're already creating and collecting, and just trying to reduce the scope and the amount. So we're hoping that that'll help with some of our communication timeline as well, because we're not going to have that many quantity of documents to go through on an administrative side. So we're hoping that'll give us more capacity for some of the communication. For the calendar, yes, that is something that I can commit to improving how we communicate that forward and giving a timeline of when things will be coming up for recruitment and communicating that outwardly so that council's aware and that members of the public are aware. I'll look at how we're putting that together and see how we can do as far as an outward facing. One of the things I say all the time, it's not just what you say, it's how you're saying it. We need to make sure we're looking at how we're saying this so people know what's coming forward and we can be more strategic. The 2 weeks comment, to be frank, we'd like to see how 2 weeks works because we've never had a timeline before. We don't want to build in artificially short timelines for this because these are public volunteers. Sometimes we have people that are on vacation. We get an out of office reply saying, hey, I've gone to X for 3 weeks. We want to have some operational flexibility to make sure that we're not telling people we don't want them to volunteer for us without a good reason. But this, we believe, will be quite an improvement where we can move to that next place. And if we find that 2 weeks is too long, we want to make this a living document. We'll come back and tell you if we need less time.
Okay, that's great. I love living documents. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Russell.
Thank you very much. Thank you for addressing the 2-week timeline. Somewhat later this summer, I might actually take a week and a bit off. And if I was a volunteer who had demonstrated that I want to volunteer for a thing, I would hate to miss that opportunity because of too short a time frame to be able to respond. I might even not respond to email while I'm away. It's going to be, I guess we'll have to see on that. This is excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you for putting it in an AO so that everybody knows what the roles are. I appreciate that. I tried doing that with one of the things last year, and that didn't work out all that well. So it's good to see this happening. The one thing that I have concern over is someone applying to only one group. If I'm going to want to help my community, want to help my municipality, I'm going to want to do it. And if I can't do it in the most effective, efficient, the right way possible, I still want to help, so I want to do it in a second way. So by having the ability to apply to multiple committees, it gives that, instead of going for months, hearing that there's nothing, and so it failed, and now I've got to restart the process, and now I've missed every timeline. By being able to apply for multiple boards, committees, et cetera, at the same time, it means that my application would be streamlined. I recognize the flip side in that the applicant would not hear until all options were concluded. But I would still see a lot of value in someone being able to apply to multiple groups. So.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Mayor Savage, to the councillor. That has been a component of this review and part of the debate and the going back and forth. So we're not limiting it to one, we're limiting it to two, one external, one internal. So we're only trying to reduce one option. And realistically, it's a practical application of the stats of when people have applied. We've allowed up to 3. And what we've seen is that some people have applied for up to 3, but when the committees are making their choice, they're typically, I would say routinely, only looking at people for their first, maybe second option. We have some specific committees that are more complicated to recruit for, especially when it comes to the expertise type of recruitments. We may be looking at, again, reevaluating this recommendation. What we have found is that, and this, I'll speak from conversations from people that we've engaged with through this process and some of the feedback we've heard. We have people that will apply for 3 and be selected for none. We have people that'll apply for 1 and be selected for none. It's soup to nuts of where it is. What we have found is that the third selections were routinely never considered by the committees. And we found this would be a clearer way of communicating with the public of what their options are, and only reducing that one opportunity. So it would be, we're aware that there is a bit of it. We have lots of people who want to serve. We have more people who want to serve for some committees than we have committees available, and we have some committees that nobody applies for. We're really just trying to find the solution that's going to create the most engagement with the least amount of redundancy for the public.
I appreciate that. I would still appreciate consideration for it to be expanded to 2 internal committees. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, folks. Councillor Digger-Gammon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the report. The councillor interviews that were done, were they done with the previous council or this council?
It would have been the previous council.
Or previous council?
A number of the members are still serving on council, but it was done prior to, it was done pre-2020.
Right, okay. I was just worried I might have missed something again, so that's good. When we talk about the external, appointments to external committees, and just from the experience I'm having with the Water Commission, and when you think about commissions, they do have an interview, right? So that's a more robust
Yes, they do.
process than the standard application. And when you look at them, is work done with those commissions to say what is the skill set that they're looking for? Oh, sorry.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. Yes, the Water Commission participates in the interview process.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. All right, colleagues, are you ready for the question? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you, folks. That's good work. We will go to 12.1.2. This is municipal services for the deaf and the hard of hearing. There's a report. I don't think there's a presentation for that one, so Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the Executive Standing Committee recommend that the Regional Council direct the Chief Administrative Officer, CAO, to implement an 18-month pilot program to offer sign language interpretive services, as well as to include more technology specifically designed for deaf and hard of hearing within recreation programs. I so move.
Second, Councillor Digger-Gammon. Councillor Mason.
Nothing on it.
Thank
Question.
you. Councillor Russell.
Thank you very much. I've just got a couple of questions. It talks about training for those who would be in frontline positions. Presumably, this training would continue for those who are new to frontline positions. It wouldn't just be training for the people who would be entering those frontline positions. And I'm wondering which frontline positions. Would this be 311? Would this be the customer service centers? Would this be recreation desks? Would this be, which frontline positions would it be for?
To you, Mr. Mayor.
To the counselor? Oh, sorry.
You're good.
I'm good. I've never done this before. My apologies. It would be, so the working group would consist of folks from a lot of different business units, including 311. And so I think the main probably employees it would be targeting would be front desk staff and like the primary kind of first point of contact for folks. So either front desk staff or people who provide the recreation programming. However, it could be broad enough that it could be used by multiple different business units. So the training would look like either it would be in-person training, but then also kind of a manual type training where folks could read through and have a better understanding of communication and different ways to communicate and understanding, and then also understanding some of the technology that we're hoping to procure through the pilot project.
Okay, so that seems to cover a fair amount. Would it include things like planning? And one of the things that just occurred to me is police. Would first responders be receiving any of this type of training?
They certainly could be receiving some of this type of training. They hadn't necessarily been in the scope of the initial project because the initial project was around municipal recreation services. But we could work with the folks in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion and other areas to see if this training could be something that could be offered more broadly, depending on the context and the scope, certainly.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Councillor Hensby.
Thank you much, Mr. Mayor. Just to clarify, we have closed captioning on our broadcast now, do we not? On our YouTube channel and stuff. I'm just kind of curious. And in the past, I thought we had American Sign Language as part of our broadcast from Eastlink. I wasn't sure if that is still being done or not.
Councillor Hensby, there's an information report that is attached to this with information regarding that. American Sign Language was available on Eastlink up until 2015 when it was removed due to lack of providers that can offer it within the HRM. We have gone through and looked at ASL services for council meetings, and that information was brought back to you in the information report you have in front of you. We are looking at increasing services within meetings, including the introduction of caption in room here. We're just working on a few components for our audiovisual screens to make sure it can work. It's a little complicated with the amount of things we have within it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ready for the question? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, folks. We'll go to the Youth Advisory Committee, 12.2.1 Communication Strategies, M200. Welcome to Becca and Cyril. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
There's no presentation.
No presentation. Councillor Mason?
Thank you. I move that the Executive Standing Committee direct the Chief Administrative Officer to prepare a staff report in consultation with the Youth Advisory Committee on developing a communication strategy on bylaw M200 respecting standards for residential occupancies and other housing-related guidelines targeted for youth, first-time renters, and newcomers.
Second by the Deputy Mayor. Councillor Mason?
Yes. Thumbs up. So we know, going back to the beginning, when M200 was first adopted and through all the subsequent revisions, that our challenges are young first-time renters, newcomers, folks who may be from places where they did not have the same rights or any rights as tenants, who do not know that there's an obligation on the part of a landlord to provide a safe space to minimum standards. And, you know, some work has been done. You know, the brochures, I think, are in 6 or 8 languages, is what, or they were a couple years ago. But I definitely think that work has been stalled since COVID happened, and certainly the new rental registration and the update to M200 require all that material to be rethought. And I think this is a great idea. So strong support for this, and thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Russell?
Thank you very much. I'm just curious, the next item that we're going to be discussing is the Youth Advisory Committee work plan. And I see that there's going to be the communication strategy where you're consulting with the Youth Advisory Committee, and this isn't something that I didn't see in their work plan. So when through the year, or what format, or et cetera, would this take?
Thank you. This actually comes under the, in terms of the purview of our third item of our work plan, so it's youth perspectives, including one item being housing. And when we were discussing as a committee in terms of our ideas in terms of work plans for the year, housing was something that always came up. And this project really came under the purview of, we were trying to find an item of housing that was under, tiptoeing that line between provincial and municipal housing, or, authorities. And we thought that bylaw M200, especially with the new tenancy registry being implemented this year, we felt that this was an adequate way to sort of target that item on our work plan.
Okay, so you're using housing as the vehicle to go through the communications and see how that's going to work?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Ready for the question, colleagues? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. While you're there, we will look at the Youth Advisory, 12.2.2, Youth Advisory Committee Work Plan. It's in the report, the work plan. Anything you want to say before we... Nothing
really, no. This was the product of brainstorming through our committee. So this was really the points that we felt were most important to us, and they were reflected in the work plan.
I'll also add that we also have some other youth perspectives within this work plan from the brunch that we had with you, Mr. Mayor, where we opened up the table to get more feedback from general youth.
Thank you. Did you ever finish all that food that you had that day at the... I walked away with some fruit for sure. It was a good meeting. Councillor Mason.
I'll put the motion on the floor that the executive committee, that the executive standing committee review and approve the Youth Advisory Committee 2023 work plan as set out in attachment 1 of the report dated June 15th, 2023.
Seconded by Councillor Hensby. Councillor Mason.
I just felt like now's a good time to remind everyone that this was Laura Lee Nichols who brought this forward to bring back a youth advisory committee, and there was some concern because in the past it had been hard to retain the interest and momentum. That does not appear to be the case. You guys have a great plan, and I really appreciate everything you're doing. So thank you for this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Russell, you were there at that brunch, I think.
I was there, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Meeting the youth was phenomenal. And I really, it sounds like that went well. And I'm hoping that that energy continues, that we have people who will be more engaged, and there won't be any challenges with quorum. Was there discussion about that?
Through Mr. Mayor and to the councillor, there have been consistent conversations around quorum. We're doing a really good job working with the clerk's office at looking at making sure that that committee is youth-friendly and that we're able to offer different ways for youth to be engaged throughout their meeting. And so we've met quorum every meeting since. So
That is fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Becca.
Thank you. Councillor Hensby.
Thank you much, Mr. Mayor. A couple of my questions have been asked already in regards to attendance and quorum and participation. I'm kind of curious in your work plan, though, that I always thought there might be an opportunity in the fall every year when schools restart, there would be an opportunity to reach out to the high school leadership and maybe the universities. It all depends what age group you want to target, like junior high school and universities have their student unions and everything else like that, or student councils. Might be an opportunity to have a leadership summit with all those folks to talk about whatever issues may be. I know the peninsula's universities and high schools may have different issues, but they're always around at the same time, so it might be an opportunity to discuss various issues there.
through the mayor to the councillor, this is something we've discussed, having something called a youth summit. So we've done that a couple of years ago where we had youth from all across the municipality, including high schools and universities, come and chat about different municipal topics. So we're hoping to do something like that in the fall.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I've had a chance to meet with the council a few times. It's really great. I wonder if you could just chat a little bit about you have been able to meet with some folks from our city staff on some of the issues. Can you just chat about some of the folks in our staff you've had a chance to bang things around with?
Absolutely. So we've had meetings with we've had presentations from the Planning and Development Committee, and that was sort of what really created the impetus for our motion on the bylaw M200. And we've also received lately, for example, presentations on the new lighting strategies in our municipal parks. And it's been, and also from Halifax. So we've had various presentations from various different business units, and that's what helped us shape our work plan for the year, having already had these presentations over the last year.
Yeah, that's great. Look, I would just reiterate what our committee has said on a number of occasions, that if there's something that you think we can do to help, we don't want to direct, we want to work with. But if there's something that we can do that's helpful, we'd be happy. I think everybody on this committee would be happy to be involved in that. So I think you know that, but we're serious about that. And we want to help, and particularly younger folks like me and Councillor Russell and Hensby. You know, we get that. So we're with you. Okay. All right, folks, ready for the question? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. Motions, we have none. In camera, is there anybody that wants to try to deal with anything that's in camera without going in camera? What's that? Up to you. We can do them all in camera. Councillor Mason?
I can test on 14.1 and 14.2, which are different from 14.3, so I'll put 14.1 on the floor, that Executive Standing Committee adopt the recommendations as outlined in the private confidential report dated April 24th, 2023, and 2, direct that the private confidential report dated April 24th, 2023 be maintained private and confidential.
Seconded by the councillor from Sackville.
Question.
All those in favor? Opposed? 14.1 passes. Councillor Mason?
For 14.2?
You want to go for 14.2? Okay. Councillor Russell moves us to go. I'll just ask if there's any notices of motion. I'm also going to ask if there's any public participation. Is there anybody here who wishes to speak? If there is, please line up in an organized fashion on the left. No, the right? No, the left. Is there anybody that wishes to speak? Is there anybody here that wishes to speak? Seeing none, we'll close public participation. Councillor Russell has moved we go in camera. We will go in camera. Okay, we're back at Executive Committee to ratify the work we did in camera. I'll call on Councillor Russell for 14.2. 14.1 we dealt with before we went in camera. 14.3, there isn't a motion. Councillor Russell, 14.2.
I believe that what we have here is different than what we discussed. I'm just wondering if there is a slight change in wording. The one that's on the public agenda, yeah.
It was amended, right?
Sure, okay.
I think you can just say as amended.
I'll do that. Yep. I move that the Executive Standing Committee one adopt the private and confidential report dated June 30, 2023, and two, direct that the private and confidential report dated June 20, 2023 be maintained private and confidential.
Second by Councillor Daigle-Gammon.
Question?
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That is carried. We have no notices of motion or public participation. Our next meeting will be the end of summer. Gee, August 28th. If there's nothing else, folks, I will accept a motion to adjourn from Councillor Russell. We're adjourned.